In this video, we're going to take a look at how to add a registration form to our application. So before we add the actual form, let's think about what we need to do. So we want to use the GraphQL mutation to register a user, right? So we definitely need the mutation and we need to write some GraphQL code in here. So let's import the mutation from React Apollo as well as the GQL tag from GraphQL tag. Now once we have this, we can actually create the mutation itself, and I'm going to call that register user, and we're going to make use of this tag, and let's write the mutation itself. So the mutation is going to be called register, and if you remember, there are three things that we need for registration. We need a name, a username, and a password. So I'm going to type in $name, which is a string that's required. Then we have a username, which is a string that is required, and last but not least, we need a password, which is of type string as well, and that is also required. And then this is going to call the register mutation that we have and pass in these variables that we have created for the registration mutation. So that's the name, and then we have the username, which is $username, and then we have the password, which is $password. Now remember, the register mutation returns a Boolean value indicating whether the registration was successful or not, so we don't need to write any curly braces here to return that value because it's going to be either true or false. So what we will do is keep this register page functional component, but we'll also add a component class in here, and because of that we'll need to import the component as well from React, and I'm going to say class and call this maybe register form that extends the component, and I'm going to create a state for this, and we'll instantiate the name, the username, and the password to be empty. So this is going to be the initial state, and then of course what we'll need to add is also a render method, and this is going to return some JSX code for us. I'm just going to return an empty paragraph for now. Now, how is this going to work? Well, we create this register form component, so we're going to add that to the register page. So I'm just going to add this register form component right there. So this paragraph should now theoretically be rendered automatically for us. Or let's just type in this is the form so that we can actually see it. Okay, so this is where our registration form is going to be. Okay, so how do we add that form? Well, we need to wrap it in a mutation, right? So we type in a mutation, so that's the mutation component that Apollo React exposes for us. And I'm going to say mutation, and that's going to be the register user mutation. So once that's done, we're going to call register and extract the loading and the error properties from that object that it returns, and we're going to do some processing right here. So what is that processing going to be? Well, first of all, we need a form that is going to have an onSubmit event, and we're going to write some JavaScript code in here as well. So we have the event itself, we will call prevent default, and then we're going to call the register mutation, and I'm going to pass in variables. And what are the three variables that the register mutation requires? Well, it's the name, which we will get from this.state.name, is the username, which is this.state.username, and it's the password, which is this.state.password. And that's all what we needed. And once this register function is called, then we extract the data that it returns for us. And we're going to, for now, just log it out. And let's do error handling as well. So if there's an error, I'm going to say console.error, error. Okay, so this works. However, let's close the form element. We need to do a few additional things in here, actually quite a few additional things. Now, one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we add the input elements, right? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy the input element code, and I'm just going to walk you through one of those. So what I copied is a label that has a span name, and it has an input element as well that has a type text for the name and the username, and the type password for the password. And then for the value, it takes the state representative of the actual input field. So this state.name, username, and password. And on change, so if someone is typing, then we're calling password change, username changed, and name changed as well. So we need to write those functions, and those functions are going to be very, very simple. Let me just scroll up here. They will take the value that's in the input box, and it is going to update the register form state fields. So if the name is being entered by the user, on each key type, they're going to set the state with the actual value that's in the input box. And the same is true for the username and the password. So that's the form, and we will need to add another thing for the form, and that is going to be, let's add a new div here, and it's going to be a button that is going to say register. Okay, so we have the register button there, and we can access the loading and error states of the mutation. So let's go ahead and do that as well. So after this last div, I'm going to say loading. So if we are actually loading, we're going to add a paragraph that says adding user. And if there's an error, we're going to say error did not register user. Okay, and then we close the form, and then we close the mutation as well. Now what I would like to do as well is, once we've hit submit, which is right here, after this last cache statement, I want to call reset fields, and reset fields is going to be yet another function that is going to very simply set the state of the name, the username, and the password fields to be blank. So let's save this, and what we get now is a registration form. Now I'm not going to worry about styling this because this should work. So we have a name, a username, and the password, and the register button. Now notice that the register button is currently active. What I want is that if the name and the username and password are not filled out, I want the register button to be disabled. So that's just some user experience added to the application. So I'm going to say valid form. So the form is only valid if this.state.name is not equal to null, or sorry, to empty, and this.state.username is not equal to an empty string, and this.state.password is not empty either. And then what I'm going to do is find the button itself and add a disabled property to it, and I will say this should be set to be disabled if the form is not valid. Okay, so as you can see now, there's no way I can click the actual button. So let's try to register a user with some very simple information. Okay, so we got adding user, and notice in the console I now get registered true. So I can zoom in a little bit for you so you can see it's a register true, and this is what the GraphQL endpoint returns to us. Now if I try to re-register this user, remember we can have only one username because we've set up that to be a unique value. We now get error did not register user. Excellent. Now as opposed to just logging out the actual registration information to the console, I'm going to add another value to the state of the register form, and I'm going to say success is false, and in the reset fields I'm going to also say this set state success false. And when do we set success to be true? Well, we're going to set the state right here. So I'm going to call this set state. So instead of doing the console log statement, I'm going to say success data.register, which should be true. And we can then print out a message somewhere after the form. So say right here, we could say this.state.success. Then we can say registration successful. Okay, so let's try to register another user, adding user, and now we get registration successful. Excellent. So now we have achieved registration of users. So if you check the database now, these new users that you registered by the form should be added to the database.